Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dara Hosey. I'm with the College of Architecture, Design, and Construction. And it is my big pleasure to introduce y'all to Rusty Smith. You are in for such a treat today. You are. So Rusty holds the distinction of being the Beatty and Ann Gresham Professor in our School of Architecture, Planning, and Landscape Architecture. And for some of you who might not know, Beatty Gresham is actually the architect of record for this facility that we're in today. In addition to being one of the favorite faculty members and a nationally recognized teacher and scholar, he's twice been honored by the AIA with a National Teaching Award. Rusty serves as the Associate Chair of the Architecture Program, and he's also the Associate Director of the Rural Studio. In case you think that I'm about to introduce a real fancy pants architect to you, you should know that Rusty grew up on a farm in Alabama, spent a lot of his childhood in West Alabama, and he came to Auburn as a student, graduated in '91 with a bachelor's in interior design. He went on to the Art Institute of Chicago, where he got his Master of Fine Arts from the School of Art at the Art Institute. And in addition to teaching at Auburn, he joined Auburn's faculty in 1997. He's taught and lectured as a distinguished visiting artist at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in the Department of Architecture, Interior Architecture, and Designed Objects. He's worked as a senior designer for a variety of internationally recognized architectural firms, including Perkins & Will and Helmuth, Obata, and Kassebaum. But he's mostly known for his work in the studio here at Auburn, and also what he's done with the Rural Studio in preparing our students to go out and be citizen architects. So I'd like to introduce you, Rusty.
Great. Thanks, Dara. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Ilea. It's a lot of pressure knowing that you're all, some of you at least, are planning to come out to Hale County tomorrow. Because that means if this presentation's crummy, you might back out. So hopefully you don't. Hopefully maybe some more folks will come if you've got the time. You're going to have some great weather, and it is. And I'm from West Alabama, so I'm a little biased about the place. But I will say it is an absolutely remarkable place, and it's a remarkable place for Auburn to have students living and working and going to school out there. So how many of you know a little bit, something, a lot about Rural Studio? Have you heard of it? Good. We hope so. It's actually funny. We're in a strange way a lot more known nationally and internationally than we are here in Alabama. And obviously we'd like to change that because we are sort of an extraordinarily proud place-based program. So Rural Studio is a design build program, of part of the architecture program. Some of the things, if I go speak to an audience that folks that aren't familiar with Rural Studio or architectural education, they'll think the Rural Studio is an architecture firm that hires students, or they'll think that it's a construction firm that hires students. They'll often think it's a whole architecture program in and of itself, and it's not. It's a piece, a small but important piece of the 5-year accredited undergraduate program of architecture here on campus. And our students, typically anywhere from 18 to 21, 22 years old, they have an opportunity to leave campus and go to West Alabama to live and work there in the community. So, and the students, and I'll say this a number of times because it takes a little bit of time to kind of understand it, and for many audiences to even believe it. The students design and build all of the work that we're going to see today, and all of the work that you'll see tomorrow. And it's pretty remarkable what young people can do sometimes if you just kind of get out of their way. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So. The Rural Studio was founded by Sambo Mockbee and D.K. Ruth almost a year ago. And it was founded around a couple of really simple premises, a handful of really simple premises that almost go without saying, but particularly if you're a rural redneck kid from Alabama like me, the first though is that the best way to learn how to do something is to actually do it. And so there's a component when our students come to the university, when they come to the classroom, they obviously come to the university to develop knowledge, right? That's why we come to school. Rural Studio is really built not to go beyond that sort of creation of knowledge, but actually begin to help young people transfer that knowledge into actual know-how. It's really what we call it. So the second premise that the program was designed around is if you don't know how to do something, if you're trying to figure out how to do something, the best way to do that is to do it together, right? And so the collaborative focus of the work, of young people working together with faculty and staff in partnership, we're sort of not the bosses. We've got more experience than the students do, but we work together to help them affect the things that they want to do that honestly, very often, we don't know how to do. The third thing is probably the most profound bit, the honestly most important part, and it was this idea that Sambo and DK had when they first started the program. They said if architects are going to be recognized as professionals, we have to think about what that means relative to our responsibility. And so if you think about, what does it mean to be a professional architect? Well, it's kind of hard for a lot of folks to think about that. It's sometimes even hard for architects to think about it. But you can think of other professions that we know maybe and maybe even at least think we understand a little better, like say medical professionals or legal professionals. So if you think of a lawyer, right? They have a legal responsibility to act outside of financial compensation. So ensconced in the Constitution of this country, equal representation under the law is a right. We all have it, right? If a doctor, maybe a better way, a more clear way to think about it, if a doctor is driving down the road and they see an automobile accident on the side of the road, they can't sort of stop and look at their watch and see if they have time to help the accident victim. They can't stop and check and see if if the accident victim has an insurance card to see if they can pay for their services. They have a professional responsibility to act, or they'll lose their professional license. It's important because that's not while it involves ethics and involves morals, those aren't ethical responsibilities and they're not moral responsibilities, they're professional responsibilities. And, Sambo talked about it all the time. He would say, if architects are going to be professionals, like other professionals, that when we see people in crisis, we have to act. We have a professional responsibility to do so. So, by extension, he would often talk about that sort of, good design is a right, that everyone deserves it, whether they can afford it or not, right? And that's really important for architects, especially today, where 5% of the built environment that we exist in was designed by architects, by trained professionals. It means that sort of most of our environment comes from somewhere else, and for sort of some other underpinning. So all of a sudden, we begin to think of ourselves as kind of luxury commodities for people that can afford us, and that's kind of a crummy way to think of yourself as a professional, right? So this idea of responsibility is really important to the program. You can't learn to swim in a field, right? So the provenance of this is a little suspicious because it actually came out of a fortune cookie here in Chengdu, downtown, back when Chengdu was still downtown. But the lesson is still a pretty good one, right? It's if you can think about it. If you want to learn how to swim, what do you got to do, right? You got to go to the swimming pool, or where we are, you got to go to the river or the creek, right? To learn to swim. If you flip this on its head, though, there's a kind of a more important lesson to be learned, and it's this notion that if you find yourself in a field, what in the world are you doing thinking about swimming? You should be actually doing things that you can do right where you find yourselves. And so this notion of place, this notion of where you are in the world is really important. We ask our students to look right down at your feet, where you are, and then look up, and there is a lifetime of work right in front of you. We live and work in this remarkable place, and there's just so much work that needs to be done right where you find yourself. The grass is not greener. So this is our field. It's in rural West Alabama. We have about a 5-county service population, but we operate out of Hale County, Alabama. It's historically a very agrarian place. It has a long hydrological history that I could give you a kind of a whole lesson on that's really important. We actually, I did talk about the field, but we actually do have ponds, right? Thanks in large part to Auburn University. We grow a lot of catfish here now. It's a tough, hard life to get food out of the ground here, but we do grow a lot of fish, and we grow a whole lot of 2x4s and telephone poles. We push a lot of pine trees up out of the ground here. So you know where we are. So there's Boston, there's New York, there's Washington, there's Detroit, Chicago, Atlanta, New Orleans, Disney World, Disneyland, way over there, and right smack in the dab middle of everything is Alabama, right? Really important part of the United States. Here we are. We're sitting here in Auburn, Alabama. We know where Birmingham is, the financial capital of the city. Montgomery, the sort of civic capital and government capital of the city. Selma, Alabama is sort of right there in the kind of belly button of the state. And then Hale County over there all the way on the west side of the state. So we're here almost over in Georgia, and Hale County, where we operate, is almost over in Mississippi. It's about 2.5 hours from here. You'll find that out tomorrow when you ride out. But this relationship, kind of this belt across the state, from Hale County to Selma to Montgomery, in the Black Belt, is really important. It's important historically in ways that quite honestly still resonate very deeply in our place. These images that were taken by Walker Evans back in the 30s and then published in the late 30s and early 40s that began to expose the kind of the plight of the itinerant dirt farmer in rural. In the Black Belt area, but particularly in West Alabama, sort of shocked the world based on, where all of a sudden sort of began to expose what poverty people were living in the rural South in particular. And so, but even then, it was and today, it is a place of great wealth, right? Even today, after all these years, almost 100 years after those photographs, and Let Us Now Praise Famous Men were published, but it also continues to be a place of absolute abject poverty. It's surprising that people in the United States still live in the circumstances that they do. Actually, I obviously get to talk to young people quite a bit, and often when I've got a whole other series of slides, I'm just showing you one image of where some of our clients live. But when I show them these images and ask where they think it is, it's always in some third world country, right? And so these rural populations that live off the highway, off the road, it's sort of stunning. So the United States has about 14% of our population living in poverty. Alabama's got about 18%. Hale County, this number is actually a little bit old. It's actually a little bit over 30% now in Hale County, living under the poverty line. And that tar paper shack that I showed you, Shepherd and Alberta Bryant's house. That's actually there's not a lot of people living in that kind of condition. This is the condition that's replaced it. The second and third hand trailer home, which in a lot of ways is a tougher situation. Which if we have some time, we'll get to that. This is downtown New Bern, Alabama. This is where you're going to show up. It's a population of 186 people. It's a thriving metropolis. We've got it's where Auburn University's campus is, and it has all the stuff that a university would have. We have a sort of a student union. It's the post office. We have a federal building. That's incredible. We still have an open post office in this tiny little town. We have a post office, and we have a mercantile. This is Henry, our across the street neighbor, and GB, who's run the general store for 40 years. GB just retired, and a young couple has come and bought the store. But it's a really important sort of place, for interactions, for buying food. There's a little restaurant in there and those sorts of things. So this little town to actually have this place is important. You can see Henry's getting his breakfast, I think. There. Nope. It's a little orange juice right here, right there. So, Frances Sullivan, our postmistress, again, it's amazing that we have a post office still open. We work really hard to help them stay open. This is our architecture building. We call it the Red Barn. If you're familiar with the architecture program here on campus, it's in a big red building, Dudley Hall. We have a big red building here in New Bern. It looks just like an architecture school anywhere else. We've got our faculty. Auburn doesn't even have a faculty club here on campus. We've got one in Hill County. This is where our young faculty live and work. This is the worldwide headquarters, Morissette House. This is where you'll start out tomorrow, I think. You'll find when you show up that the students. This is where the staff work. This is where the students live. You'll find the students actually living and working on a working farm. A lot of that has to do with the fact that our students come with us and they think this is what food looks like, right? Or they think this is what food looks like. And hopefully by the time they leave and have sort of worked out here for anywhere from a semester to a year or more, that they'll learn that this is what food looks like, or maybe even that's what food looks like, right? It's a kind of an eye-opener for our students. We do a lot of things with a lot of great consultants. Scott Peacock is one that you guys may know from the Food Network. He works with us all the time. He works on what's called educating the students on what he calls a 0-mile meal, where all of your food for your day, for all of your meals from the day, come from 0 miles away from where you are. Eating together is really important. The students, faculty, and staff eat together, lunches and dinners many times during the week and during the year. The students, again, design and build everything. So even the farm infrastructure for ourselves, we design and build that. Here's the students working on what's a piece of infrastructure, a large greenhouse on the farm we're just now getting opened up. We have dormitories just like here on campus. This is where the students live. We are known to do a lot of material exploration. We explore on ourselves before we do on our clients. So you can see they're neat and tidy and studious, just like all college kids are. If you know the Rural Studio, you probably know some of the earlier work of our houses. That's certainly where we started, and we're still centered clearly on the single-family house. So some of the early houses were Shepherd and Alberta Bryant's house, the Butterfly House, which was all about collecting water off the roof, Christine's house, which we fondly call the Dirt House, which is made out of clay excavated from the site and papercrete, so make these sort of really lightweight, hyper-insulated clay and paper blocks that the house is built out of. The carpet tile house for Lucy Harris, built out of about 60,000 carpet tiles that are stacked up as the perimeter wall of the house. This is what again, there's nothing magic or special about our students. This is what they look like. They look like any group of students might. When we start any semester, we start with what we call neck down work. So the students come out. Again, university is often thought about like working a lot with your head, sort of neck up. When we start with them, we say, okay, turn off your head for a minute. And we're kind of kidding about that, but sort of we're going to work with our body. And so we do a lot of things. We do a lot of repair work, community fix-up work, things like that. But in this case, this group of students, and this is not abnormal, we were donated this barn that you see behind the students there on the left. And the students very carefully, mostly very carefully, took it down piece by piece, categorized it, thought about how it was put together, what parts they could reuse, what they couldn't reuse, and those sorts of things. So there's this idea very often that you think about of if one of the ways to learn how to put something together is to take it apart, right? And so that's a learning exercise for them. We're really client-driven. So in this case, this is our client, Rosalie Turner, who's living in the community. Her house she was sort of a matriarch of this larger community called Footwash, Alabama. Her house was falling down around her, and her two sons had to the house and were actually living in two different counties, one with a relative and one with a friend. And so the program was to design Rosalie a house and her sons a house that they could sort of move back in together. So the students are here sort of working with Rosalie, sort of talking about what they're going to do. She's sort of giving them advice about, kind of her needs and those sorts of things. All of the work is incredibly vetted, so we've got we're not fancy pants architects, but we have a lot of fancy pants architects that come in, and you can see kind of all of the schemes that the students are proposing as options for Rosalie Turner's house. So the process is incredibly iterative. We work with consultants. This is Anderson Inge. He's an engineering consultant that we work with and sort of begin to understand not just what the things look like, but how they're going to be built and how they're going to perform from an energy standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, in this case from a structural standpoint. We are a design build program, so the students design and then build everything. So they have to know sort of every detail of the projects that they design, but ultimately they do get to work. So here, this is Rosalie Turner's house, the white house in the back. So the idea is pretty straightforward. We do this a lot. Rosalie stays sheltered in her house where she's been living forever. We come in and we build a platform right in front of her house, and so the idea is we build a new house directly in front of the old one. She moves into the old one, and then we're able to tear down the new one. So it's right on the property, utilizing all of the kind of resources that are there on her property that she owns. This is the house under construction. Here you can see Allie. These are all of the interior wood and the bricks here were all salvaged from that barn that I showed you earlier, and redressed and used in the interior of the house. And this is Rosalie and her two sons on the day that they moved in, right? It's beautiful interior, if I say so myself. Great front porch. You'll see two things when you go out that there's two things that weigh heavily in rural studio projects. It's front porches, roofs, right? If you got those two things, you can do better than survive in the environment that we're in. You can thrive. So then, there's her house up there at the top, the white. The very next day after they moved in, the students got to work. They bulldozed her house and began construction of an addition. So here's another view of that front porch of this wing. So I don't know if this works. So that's where the old house was there. That's the back of the new house. And then so they got Rosalie and her sons moved into this part of the house, and then they immediately started construction of this wing so that her sons could then move out of the living room where they were sleeping into bedrooms here. And then you can see it actually begin to make this great kind of family courtyard with some memory of the existing house there. So we do focus on the single-family house. We do a lot of houses, but we also do all kinds of other stuff. So this is Antioch Baptist Church. Also, in a funny way, a similar project. The existing church was here. This was the steps that went up. The church, there was a storm, and the church had washed off of its foundations. The students came, built a temporary church, took down what was left of the existing church, and then built this new church out of it. So all of the interior material was from the existing church. You can see the way the students think about design is pretty interesting. It's an incredibly sort of closed, internally focused box. But then when you go inside, all of a sudden you have this sort of, the big view is to the cemetery beyond. So when you come in, you sort of see where you're going. If you're a good Southerner, sort of outlaw Baptist like me growing up, you kind of understand the need, for a full dunking kind of baptismal and the sort of the death door and all that kind of stuff. So being immersed in the place, the students begin to understand, even though they're not there, they may not have grown up in this place, they actually begin to able to interact with the clients and sort of culturally understand kind of the things that they need. So we do sacred projects like churches. We do very profane projects like bathrooms in a park. This is this is a series of bathrooms in Perry Lakes Park. There's 3 of them. It's a needed infrastructure in a park. The students had this idea that if we're going to go to all this trouble to build bathrooms, we really need to have the bathrooms be more than a place to relieve yourself. And what's interesting is that when if there's any, during our day, there's really not a more contemplative place or moment that we ever have, right? Every day, if we're doing it right. So these bathrooms, there's 3 of them. The students said, well, we want these to be a way that people can think about the park and contemplate the park and understand where they are. So the first one, it's the mound toilet. It's this toilet that's sort of built down in the ground, and when you come in and coming through the door there, and you sort of sit down and you look out through this slot as you're sitting, and you sort of get this incredible kind of horizontal view of the landscape in the park. The second one is the tower toilet. So this is 40 feet tall. When you go in there's your place of contemplation. You sit down, and you look up, and you have this remarkable view of the sky, right? This sort of beautiful framed view of the sky. And then the third one is, that old story, the old saw of you can't see the forest for the trees, right? Well, so here you're in this whole forest, and when you go in and sit down, you have this sort of very special relationship with the one tree. So we've done things, sort of pavilions, a remarkable about 130-foot span footbridge to open up a larger part of the park. The students have designed and built boardwalks along these sort of beautiful, there's 7 oxbow lakes there along the Cahaba River that sort of open up this like big, one of the primary migratory avian flyways in the United States. We have 2 big ones. One goes right through Alabama. Tremendous number of bird watchers come here, so building this boardwalk into the park. And then the students actually designed and built, actually relocated and rebuilt this tower and working with the Audubon Society to provide bird watching opportunities in this park. This is typical for our students. They say, if we're going to build a tower, it's got to be the best tower in the world. So they asked the Audubon Society, what would that entail? And they said, well, usually when you go and, if you're a birder, there's all these sort of ecosystems and ecotones, and there's types of birds that might spend their entire life living in a kind of a 25 deep strata. They never move out of it. And there's a whole other ecosystem of birds that might live above it and another one above it. And there's really no place that we know of where you can go and in a single spot see that whole ecosystem all at once. And so the student said, well, we can, if we build a 100-foot tall tower, we can do that, right? So these are some of the views over the Oxbow Lakes as you move up to the tower and all the way to the top. We do a lot of renovation work. So this is for an organization called HERO. It's this sort of tortured acronym for Hale Empowerment and Revitalization Organization. But what they really do is they do job training and help people with mortgages and understanding how bills work and those sorts of things. But we took a building that had been burned out in downtown Greensboro, and the students designed and renovated a new office for them. This was a school that had burned down in Perry County, and the students then designed and renovated it into a learning center, after-school learning center for both faculty and students. Hale County Hospital, the Hale County got a great federal grant to sort of add on to their hospital. In that grant was a whole lot of money to build this beautiful recreational courtyard you can see, which you can imagine in the rural West Alabama sun and humidity, how nice it is for the patients to come out and the doctors and the nurses and the staff to sort of sit under this tree in the shade and enjoy the day, right? So our students took this on as a project, and they basically designed and built this project there. And again, with many cast-off materials. This is this beautiful marble wall were all cast-off headstones that a marble company had miscut, and were going to throw them away. And the students, sort of in their creativity, they found out about it because they're always sort of out there in the world trying to find things. And all they did was they basically built a big stone guillotine to just break them in half. And so what you're seeing is the broken middle of those things just turned around backwards, right, to make that beautiful wall. A really important project. So we do little projects like courtyards, and we do big projects. This is the New Bern Volunteer Fire Station. Designed and built a fire station for the town of New Bern. This is really important project, as you can imagine. If you think about when I said we're focused on the home, right? That's what we're all about. We actually, why do we do all this other stuff? Well, you have to think about the kind of systemic problems that exist in this community. And this project is all about the house. So if you can imagine, if you don't have a fire station, it means houses burn down, and lots of houses burn down where we live, right? If you don't have a fire station, you can't get fire insurance. And if you can't get fire insurance, you can't get a mortgage. And if you can't get a mortgage, you can't get a house, which means it's pushing you into some other kind of product, right, that you might live in. So it's a really important kind of community piece of infrastructure as well. We've also just recently, the students have designed and built a town hall for New Bern. It provides them both a meeting place, a place to keep their records, and most importantly, actually a consecrated a place to vote. So you can imagine voting rights in this part of the world are really important. So imagine growing up your whole life with no transportation, and the closest place to vote is 15, 20 miles away, right? What that means relative to your empowerment. So actually having a place here to meet and to sort of be a real town is important. We've done a number of boys and girls clubs in West Alabama that provide students an after-school opportunities. Didn't you guys skate? Like skateboard? Roller skate? Yeah? Oh, it's that surly bunch on the back row. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Working with the Tony Hawk Foundation, he's a big skater. This group of 4 students secured a grant to pay for and design and build one of the most remarkable skate parks in the Southeast. Kids come as far from Nashville and Atlanta to skate here. If I had more time, I'd tell you more stories about it. But because the students work, this thing costs $25,000. There's a park half this size in Atlanta that was just recently built, maybe 2.5 years ago, that cost $1 million. So this is what our young people can do, leveraging a $25,000 grant from Tony Hawk, right? Their capacity of not knowing better, they don't know they can't do this, can do this. And it's great. If you know anything about skating, it offers both urban skating, which you see here, and vertical skating here, which is pretty unheard of. So we still do a lot of projects with kind of found materials, right? So in this case, there was a company in New York. They called us up, and we get a lot of this. It's really great for people to know who we are. They called us up, and they said, we've got like as many galvanized 55-gallon barrels as you would ever want. Would you guys be interested in them? We said, well, I don't know. Can you send us a picture? And so they did. They emailed us a picture. And they were pretty cool looking. They're clean and shiny, and they didn't look like kind of the oil drums that you might imagine that they were. So they said, well, can you send us some? And they said, sure. So they sent them in a truck, about 300 fit on a truck. They shipped them down here from New York, and our students did what architecture students do. They unloaded them and organized them really tidily, and then they wondered what they could do with them. They stacked them and made walls, and they thought about how they could make rooms. So we lived with these things for about 2 years, and the students were just constantly sort of pushing them around, wondering what they might do with them. Now, I should say what they are is, while it's a product that it's just going in the landfill, there's a coating on the inside of it that makes them virtually impossible to recycle, and so they just get thrown away. They're used to ship mint oil. Have you heard of mint oil? Yeah, you probably all do. If you use toothpaste or chewing gum or something like that, that's what flavors those products. One of these barrels full of mint oil is worth $30,000. So a little mint oil goes a long way, I guess, is the story there. But this thing that's really valuable that all of a sudden then becomes invaluable, our students sort of think about ways that they can make valuable again. So these 3 young women, they were working with Greensboro, the elementary school kids in Greensboro, was sort of thinking about design and construction of a playground. They didn't have a playground to work in. So they went through a lot of iterations. They learned how to weld. This is the actual playground under construction. They said, we're going to use those barrels for our primary material for the playground. And this is it finished, right? So it's a pretty remarkable thing. As an art piece and also as a play thing, it's pretty stunning. It's really fun. What is that? Yeah, you're absolutely right. So it's an incredible musical instrument. This is actually one of the things that was not designed at the beginning, but then there actually did begin to be parts of like the acoustics of the thing and the noise that it could make, and whether you bang on it or not, it's amazing during the day as the day heats up and cools down and the metal expands and contracts. They're sort of popping and pinging, and even when there's not people in the park, the park feels a little bit like it's alive during the day. We've done really fun projects for kids. We've done projects like the students have done projects like this for the community. This is Greensboro Black History and Safe House Museum. Again, could tell long stories, but the short of it is Dr. King was safe housed in this shotgun house 2 weeks before he was assassinated. The Klan he was doing a lot of preaching in the area at the time, and of course what would happen is if a lot of the preaching was happening in churches. If any of the civil rights leaders were sort of called proselytizing in a church, typically the church would be burned down in short order, right? And so he was in the area. This is actually where he and Coretta Scott King met. She was from Perry County, so it's one of the places that we do a lot of work. But he was safe housed here on the left, and then 2 weeks later was assassinated. So it had been a museum for years and years and years that was run by Teresa Burrows, who was a teenager who lived in the home when Dr. King was safe housed there. And she had sort of managed this sort of museum on her own of this sort of really sort of documented the history of the foot soldiers of the area in the civil rights movement. And so our students worked with Teresa to begin to reconfigure the two houses, connect them together so they became one building. Had this beautiful courtyard in the back, and I just realized I don't have any interior photographs, and I'm not sure if you're going to go here tomorrow, but it's worth a trip just in and of itself. But then sort of added a museum gallery here on the back. This group of 4 students worked with the boys, the Boy Scouts to design and build a scout hut. So this was, really include this photo to show you how they work. So again, they design and build everything. In this case, they built a mock-up on our own property. You'll see some of those when you go out tomorrow, that before the students build anything on the site, they build sort of important pieces and parts of their buildings on our site so that we can actually make sure that they're going to work and going to perform. So this building is pretty interesting. It's if you know anything about engineering or architecture, buildings typically generally they don't fall down. Buildings actually blow up. So the biggest force on a building is actually not gravity, it's a wind load. And so when wind passes over the roof of a building, it pushes on a building and gives lateral load to a building, but when it goes across a building, it actually acts like an airplane wing and tries to pull the building up off the ground. And so buildings are often built very light, but they have a really tight connection to the ground. The students saying, well, we have this, the Boy Scouts want a log cabin. We've got all these kind of logs that are these kind of logs that you throw away from the logging business that aren't really good for anything. You can't stack them up or anything like that. They said, we want to build a real log cabin using those logs. So what they did was build this building that has a really light connection to the ground. It has these big openings here that go down either side, and then you load those openings up with logs, and it's actually the weight of the logs that hold the building down. They're not holding it up, right? So again, who would think that, right? It makes perfectly good sense. It's perfectly logical, but folks like us, we've got too much experience to see it. Right? So it was stunning when they came to us with this idea. We were like, oh, okay. So, our experience gets in our way sometimes. It's a remarkable building. This group of 4 students designed and built this. So again, these 4 students, this is them with their sort of framing model, which they show how they're going to frame their building. The 4 built this whole Boys and Girls Club for Greensboro. It's one of the largest buildings we've taken on, most complicated buildings we've taken on to date. It's got interior classrooms, outdoor covered playground, and then obviously this sort of breakout space. That's it in action any given afternoon. Project in Newbern that you will see. This is a very, very new project for us. At Auburn University Libraries participated in this project quite a bit. It's the Newbern Library. There wasn't a library within about 15 miles. I had a huge missing hole in this sort of service population that needed a library. And our students took this abandoned building and renovated it, designed it and renovated into this kind of really great town library. And you'll see this project for sure tomorrow. Oh, this is just to remind me to get a drink. Sorry. Where is he? Right there? Oh, nice. Yeah, nice work. You have it? You'll have to share. Yeah, thank you. Oh, if I there were going to be prizes. I'd have paid attention. Okay. So one last little bit, if you've got a few more minutes. Is that you guys okay? Yeah, perfect. Okay. Because I hear there's a baseball game today that some folks want to get to. So the house. We've done a lot of houses, and over the years, folks have always talked to us about Rural Studio being all about designing affordable houses. Rural Studio designing affordable houses. Rural Studio designing affordable houses, and we always kind of that made us a little anxious and a little nervous because we never were trying to design and build affordable houses. We were just dealing with the fact that housing was, as it's procured today in America, is by all extents and pretty unaffordable. And we were saying that folks needed good, dignified houses anyway. So if you think back to the beginning of the presentation, like the Shepherd and Alberta Bryant's house, or Lucy Harris's house, or Michelle's house, or the the Butterfly house, the Harris house, none of those houses in the for-profit market would actually be affordable. They'd be really unaffordable. Most of us couldn't afford to pay an architect for the thousands of hours of design time that went into them. You couldn't afford to pay for the thousands of hours of sort of detailing these weird materials that aren't really construction materials and how you'd put them together and how they'd last and how you'd maintain them or anything like that. But because the students were being educated, that labor was free. And so we were able to leverage it into providing really good, dignified, noble housing in a way that didn't cost the client anything, but if it were done in any other way, would be really unaffordable. And so, as a land-grant polytechnic institution, at some point, we said, that's not enough. We're going to keep doing that, but we actually do need to get serious about this issue of housing affordability. And that's where this sort of notion of the 20K house came from. What's always funny, I put this up here because it embarrasses me a little bit, because this is Metropolis Magazine, real fancy magazine. You may not be able to see it, but this is a July-August edition in 2009, so 9 years ago. And what's great, it says, 8 years after Mockbee, the legendary design build program figures out affordable housing. Right? So 9 years ago, we figured it out. Which is categorically not true. It is a wicked, wicked, wicked problem. When we started this project, we thought, we'll spend a year or two, figure out how to design an affordable house, and then we'll be done. We'll go off with it. So we're in the thick of it now, 13 years later, right? And I can tell you the problem is not solved, but we're getting there, and we're persistent. So again, this is our competition, right? It doesn't look like much. But it's pretty tough. This is a product, and even if you don't buy one, and we do actually have clients that buy these just like that, 50 years old, right? But that's their option, or sleep in the woods, right? So even if I go buy a new house trailer, $50,000, I can get a 30-year note on it, and if one of our clients buys one, that's typically what you do, get a 30-year note on it. In 5 years, it's worth, these aren't my numbers, these aren't made up numbers, it's worth about $20,000. A 5-year note on $50,000 has paid about $960 in 5 years on principal. So I still owe $49,000 on this thing. It's got a designed life expectancy, again, this is not my numbers, this is the industry. It's got designed life expectancy of 28 years. That's the metric that they're designing, that manufactured housing is designed around. Those are for the really nice ones. And folks in our community aren't buying nice ones, right? So it's an issue. It's a problem. It's something to be dealt with, and we're working hard at it. So it's tough competition, right? I can buy one. I can both figuratively and literally kick the tires, and I can be living in it the next day, right? If I like it. So the project, I'm going to show you like where it started. It's a lot more complicated than this, but it just kind of makes sense, at least conceptually. These are numbers from when we very first started. So had to do a number of things, right? We're trying to design well-designed houses that are affordable and, importantly, supporting the industry of home builders across the rural South. So it's not just enough. Every design decision isn't just about how can we make the house cost less, but it's also how does that design decision that we've just made actually help create a job in that community? Because of all the things you can do in these persistently impoverished, underserved communities, of all the things you can do, if you just were going to do one thing, you'd take the few dollars that are there and you'd keep them there. And so if I buy a house trailer, that money goes to Mississippi, to Arkansas, to North Carolina, or to Tennessee, right? If I buy food, this is a little bit of a side, if I buy food in this place, that money's probably going someplace else, right? So, not a lot of money there, and it all goes away, right? So how can we keep money there, and how can we actually begin to create jobs there, right? Which is key. We want people to be able to live within their means, right? We all want to live within our means. This project isn't for poor people. It's for all of us. Because we all, I think, struggle with that. And then, begin to think about how do we design this so that it doesn't rely on us to do it. That we can actually, Auburn University can give it away and to the world and say, here, world, if you want this, take it. Run with it. Build 1,000 of these, 10,000, 100,000 of those things. We're giving this project away. Auburn University is giving this project away. So here's the stuff. This is old numbers, but it makes sense. So we think about the kind of monthly burn, what we spend per month, right? We can talk to our clients every which way to Christmas between amortization tables and insurance rates and percentages of investment, all those sorts of things. But ultimately, we want to know what we're spending per month, right? And so 13 years ago, when we started this project, we sort of found that our clients that we were targeting could afford about $108 in mortgage. And that $108 sort of backed into $20,000 cost, right? So then we said, okay, this is all conceptual, just to kind of sharpen the project. But we said, well, what if we said, what can we do with $12,000 in material? And because we're trying to pay somebody a little bit of something to do it, what would happen if we had $8,000 in labor? Well, then we say, well, okay, if we have a contractor, someone who's in charge, and he's got 3 people working for them, well, all of a sudden, that means to make a living, you have to be able to build the house substantially in about 3 weeks, right? So that became a part of the problem. But if we could do that, if we could hit that metric with the houses that we were designing, which were at that time were 1-bedroom houses, it would meet a critical need of 31% of our population in Hill County. You can see here that, this is how it was broken down, that a contractor, if you sort of built the number of houses per year that you could build, would be about $61,000 in income. The laborers at that time would be about $22,000. Probably doesn't sound like a lot of money, but this was a place that has a median income of about $18,500. Right? So they're sort of pretty good. And then you think about that what that translates into, it's about $16 million of economic impact in Hill County alone. And you think that according to government statistics, that there just throughout the Southeast, there's about 238 counties that are, by definition, persistently impoverished, right? And so you can begin to imagine not just the need it fills, but the economic sort of impact it could have. So the short of it is we've designed 22 prototypes of these houses. We've built countless of them for our community partners, and we've currently got a product line of 3 houses. We actually just are pulling a 4th one into it, but we've got these 3 product line houses. There's Dave's house. It's a little over 500 square feet. We've got Mac's house, MacArthur's house, also about 500 square feet. And then we've got Joanne's house, which is about 523 square feet. Now, interestingly, Joanne's they're all great, and you'll see these tomorrow up close and get to kick the tires on them. But what's great when you see Joanne's, I think one of the things that's really interesting is it has less material than either Mac's or Dave's house, but you'll see it's got almost 25 more square feet, right? And every project that the students take on has a particular sort of framework that they're working in. This group of students took on the kind of geometric the three-dimensional geometric problem of how materials are deployed in the house to reduce the materials. And they would always tell this kind of funny story. You guys are smart, so you'll get it. These houses, and they're great houses, right? But they're kind of these long rectangular things. If you're trying to enclose 100 square feet, there's a lot of ways you can do it, but just if imagine's sake, if you have two 100-foot walls and two 1-foot walls, right, to make a perimeter, that encloses 100 square feet. Well, that's how many linear square feet is that? Right, 202 linear feet, right? If you take four 10-foot walls, that also encloses 100 square feet, and so that's 40 linear feet, right? So all of a sudden, you've sort of increased some kind of floor span material, but you've reduced the perimeter material. So these students actually this group of students worked kind of on simultaneously 3 dimensions around that material problem to design the house. So the houses are like any affordable house, right? Any affordable house has to meet these criteria. This is whether Auburn designs them or anybody else. They have to be durable. You have to be able to build them. They have to withstand the weather, and they have to be secure, right? Every affordable house has to do that. We've all driven by affordable houses, right? We've all driven by affordable housing, and it's not often that we say, boy, I want one of those, right? And so we're always trying to be really clear, and because for some reason affordable housing has become a thing, like it's not an activity, it's kind of a noun that we can imagine. We try to be really clear that we're just designing houses that anybody would want, but that are affordable, right? And there's somehow for us, there's a difference. And so what is that difference, right? They have to have a sense of presence, right? They have to have a presence that contributes to the neighborhood, contributes to the community. They have to have a sense of community. They have to be designed in a way that is sort of inviting to the community. They have to contribute to the owner's health and welfare. There have to be real design decisions that can demonstrably begin to do that. They have to provide accommodation. They have to provide accommodation for aging in place, and what's really important where we live beyond aging in place is sheltering in place. So a house where you have someone who might have some disability, we live in kind of a tornado-prone area. We sort of catch the tail end of hurricanes and tornadoes come through, so we get a lot of wind load where we work. This is our constituents in our neighborhood that can't get out of the house, right? So how does the house actually be able to shelter someone in place becomes important. And then also, just because it's built locally out of easily gained materials, out of local labor, it doesn't mean that it can't be well crafted. So thinking about those local materials and local labor force and what they can do and what they can do well becomes really, really important. So we're currently in the process of working. We've got these houses. We're sort of working to begin to work with partners. We can build these things and meet the pro forma all day long. We're finding it is much more difficult for others to do it, and so we're working with external partners. These are a couple of houses that were built over in Georgia recently. It's the interior. I mean, they're all right, right? Yeah, all right. So what we've learned is that, our next step is actually to begin to think about how we communicate not just what's built, and that's very often what architects do, is they provide very detailed construction documents that show a contractor and their subcontractors what to build. What we're learning is that we have to not just show what to build, but we need to show how to build it and why it's built that way. And it's only if we begin to do that can we actually begin to be assured that the houses if we're not the ones providing them, actually can perform in the way that we've designed them to. So that's it. Thank you. Questions? Oh, no, we're not taking questions. No, sorry, questions. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is about the self-sufficiency of the houses. And so you're talking about a couple of different technologies about rain barrels, which is a low technology, solar power and wind power. Honestly, we've actually shied away from some of that stuff over the years because it wasn't easy to procure, maintain, or fix when it was broken. But that's all become that's really changed literally in the last 4 or 5 years. So we have incredibly high performance systems in the houses. These houses as designed, they operate on about $35 a month of electricity. We're currently, we've just broken ground actually as a partnership with Habitat here in Lee County and over in Opelika. We're designing a passive, we're building to the passive house standard, which does begin to incorporate some of those technologies, and the house can operate on zero energy, right? And that becomes really important. Not because if I say it this way, and I should say, this isn't just us working on this project. We've got big national insurance partners, big national financial partners. We've got some really big brains that are involved in the whole kind of procurement system, not just the design of the house. So if we think about say, so I can design a house that operates on I can save $25 in energy. That doesn't sound like a lot, right? You and I could go to a movie but couldn't buy any popcorn, right? We could go get a cup of coffee, but probably not afford a newspaper together. So, $25 is not a lot of money. But, and this is what some of our financial partners are sort of talking about, if you think about that monthly burn, all of a sudden, I don't have just $25 left. I have $25 more I can attach to my mortgage. Well, that doesn't sound like a lot of money either. But every dollar that you attach to a 30-year mortgage is $200 of construction financing that you can afford. So suddenly, that $25 that you just saved in the monthly burn becomes about $5,000 of additional construction costs that you can pay. And the insurance industry has actually shown that building to some of the standards that we're talking about can increase the average value in the state of Alabama of the home by over 10%. So suddenly, you're doing this sort of both and. You're protecting the financial partner's investment, whether it's the bank with a mortgage or the insurance company writing insurance. But at the same time, you're also empowering the owner to get more leverage from the amount of money that they're already spending. There's 1,000 examples like that I could give you. Those are the kind of things that when you start to look across markets, not just try to fix a piece of the thing along the way, but act systemically with partners, national partners that can change things the way they work. Because I can promise you, banks aren't big, bad, and evil. Insurance companies aren't big, bad, and evil. Contractors aren't big, bad, and evil. Nobody's trying to keep poor people out of good, dignified housing. When our partners see the consequences of the decisions they're making that they seem little, and they seem like even if they fixed it, it wouldn't change much, right? It's hardly worth it. And that's actually true. If this problem that we're addressing in the house was a stab to the heart, that'd be really easy to fix. You just armor plate the heart, right, and get on with it. But it is a classic death by 1,000 cuts. Like, none of them are bad. They just add up until you've sort of bled out, right? So attacking all those things at once become really important. But the energy use is not just sort of saving a little money. It actually reflects back into protecting everyone and allowing the owner to leverage more opportunity than they otherwise would have. It's a great question. Great question. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. So the question is, are the houses on well water? It depends. So in the houses that we're providing in our community, they're in all sorts of circumstances. They could be on well water. Sometimes they're on county water. Rarely city water. Greensboro has city water, but that's most of the towns we live in, they have county water. There's a lot of issues with county water in the different counties out there, as you might imagine. None of them are on sewer. They're all on septic, right? Out there, there's not sewer systems in these parts of the world. That has a whole other kind of set of issues that goes into it. But in our community, we're typically replacing some substandard living and actually leveraging the infrastructure that they already have, whether it's utility hookups or driveway or those sorts of things. But it's all over the board. Yes, ma'am.
How do the students get selected for this program?
That's a great question. So how do the students get selected for this program? They choose it. They choose it. They put their hand up in the air and say, "I'd like to do that." So no, we have this is a great question, and hopefully this isn't boring because it's the kind of stuff that fascinates me. The rural studio, from a curriculum standpoint, I imagine there's maybe one or two teachers in here. Yeah, a few. Yeah, so you know how this works. From a curriculum standpoint, as the way the curriculum is structured, this is in our what we call our field studies year, which in a lot of programs on Auburn, that just by just by fact becomes study abroad. So we have a lot of field studies in our program. Our students can go study in Istanbul, they can study in Rome. We've got a group of students that are leaving this weekend for the Netherlands. We've got an opportunity to study in Birmingham, and we've got an opportunity to study in Hale County. From a curricular standpoint, all of those things are exactly the same. Whether I go to Istanbul, Turkey, or I go to Hale County, Alabama, it's all the same. Take students out of the place that they're in. They're immersed in a place that they've never been and don't understand, and live there and work there, right? So all of the students that want to participate in the rural studio participate, but part of it is that they're choosing it around other field studies options. So they may choose rural studio over Rome, or they may choose Birmingham over rural studio. So not all students participate, but all the students that want to do. And we service about 45 to 50 students a year out there. Yes, sir. Not yet. Not yet. But our goal is to, and this is what I mean, we're going to give it away, because and this is what we found is we've worked with our field test partners, and we did exactly what's suggested in your question. Is we offered them our traditional set of plans that we build from, and the houses. This is a dirty little secret. Those last houses I showed you here, they look like 20K houses, but they ain't 20K houses. They cost a lot more. They don't perform as well. They're not built anything like they're supposed to be built. They look like what they're supposed to look like. And there's something about the way we as architects communicate information, and contractors, and I'm a builder. I'm a builder way before, so I'm not banging on builders or contractors. There's a miscommunication between those things. I can look at a picture and know how to build it. And that's what we do. And so there's some other way we have to transfer our knowledge to the building industry beyond us. So one of the things that we're doing is we're entering into so I just mentioned the partnership with Habitat for Humanity. We're entering into a partnership with Youth Build, which actually teaches licensed construction trades to students who otherwise would be at risk, and it does a lot of other things with them. But we sort of figured if we're, you're not going to teach an old dude like me, a builder, how to do anything new. I'm going to do things I know how to do. So getting out in front of that and teaching a new trade industry about different ways of building that are more affordable, more high performance, and those sorts of things is critical. So that instructional package, we're reticent to just give away the plans until we have this sort of larger instruction package that goes with it, that tells you kind of how to do what it looks like you're trying to do. But we're going to. That's a promise. We're gonna give this thing away. That's what Auburn University is going to do. Let's give it away as soon as we're confident in it.
Are your structures built according to the standards, building codes, electrical codes, plumbing codes, and then your public buildings? What about the ADA requirements?
So that's a great question. So the question is, are our buildings built to codes, standards, whether local standards, state standards, or national standards? And then as an add-on, are we meeting the Americans with Disabilities Act requirements? The answer is emphatically yes. We have to. We're a state institution. Auburn University is sort of the architecture firm. So I use these words loosely, but it is interesting the way Auburn University thinks about this program. We have to do those things right, even if nobody's watching. I mean, Sambo used to always talk about that it's even more important to do things right when nobody's watching, because, you know, we're working in places that don't have adequate fire protection or police protection or even trash pickup or those. So there's nobody watching, right? If we weren't Auburn University, we could do what a lot of other people out there do. But no, we follow every guideline, every rule out there that there is, because we're teaching our students to be professionals, and that's our professional responsibility to do that if we don't. Yes, ma'am. That's a good question. So what kind of experience do our students have? Where are they in the curriculum? We're a 5-year program. The students have 2 opportunities to participate in Rural Studio. They can come out in their 3rd year, and in 3rd year they come for 1 semester. So that's where the kind of the study abroad happens. So we have a lot of students that actually do go to Rural Studio in the fall and then Istanbul in the spring, right? So we have that. And then we have another opportunity for students to come out in 5th year. And the 5th year students are there for a year. We're currently, we've just, I think we can talk about it publicly. I've personally been working on it for about 5 years now. We've got a brand new graduate program it's a post-professional graduate track at Rural Studio that's coming online. Hopefully the group of students that are coming out next fall will be able to participate in that. So we'll have a 3rd opportunity for students to participate, and that will allow students from outside of Auburn University to participate in the program as well. So the students are, we do a couple of things that are kind of funny, that are unlike other architecture programs. We actually pack a lot of our technical classes a lot earlier in our curriculum. Most architecture programs don't think students are ready to kind of like, you know, they don't think they're smart enough or ready enough or whatever to be architects, so you kind of baby step them along the way, and then they kind of learn a lot of technical stuff at the end. We push a lot of technical things like structures, environmental controls, materials and methods. Those things are typically taught at the 4th and 5th year level in a lot of architecture programs. We teach that in 1st and 2nd year. And I would argue that our students are ready for that kind of thing. They came to Auburn to be architects. They're ready to go. They're pretty remarkable. Yes, ma'am. How do we choose the projects? That's super question. So living and working in the community for a quarter of a century helps a lot. So we don't invent them. They come from the community. And they come from all over the place. You know, so we lived in Hale County for 10 years, and then we sort of we slowly began to understand this kind of fire protection need as sort of more and more houses kept burning down, and we kept seeing people having to leave because there was no way that we found they didn't have insurance. They couldn't get insurance even if they wanted it, you know, and then they couldn't buy a house, or they couldn't pay to replace their house. I showed you that picture of Francis Sullivan, the postmaster at the post office. Strangely, a lot of our clients come from our postal carriers, because they're the ones who are getting off the road, going down the dirt track, and delivering mail to someone who otherwise wouldn't get it, and they get a look in the door. They see people every day. They see people for years. They know kind of what condition they're living in. She's instrumental, to be honest. I mean, it's a really good question. But they come from all over. They come from living there and being aware over time. And they take years to develop. I mean, you know, we don't just, that library project that I showed you, you know, it's 3.5 years of development to make sure that there was funding there for 3 or 4 years of operation afterwards, that there was a unit board that kind of understood what was going on, that there was a connection to the Alabama library system, that Auburn University was sort of interested and connected, that Alabama Power was committed to bringing high-speed internet to New Bern. We had to do all of that stuff, which took 4 years of time before we could walk into the studio and say, all right, students, somebody's going to design a library. There's a lot of work that goes into that on the front end. Yes, sir.
You said that from the university standpoint, there's no difference between the students who go to the rural studio experience and the stable ones in system.
Yeah.
Surely there's a qualitative
Yeah.
and y'all track those students over time. I was just talking about
Yeah.
our younger daughter did go to rural studio
Yeah?
probably 15 years ago.
Oh, who was that? Yeah, oh, she was terrible. No, no, tell her I said. No, that she's super. That's awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that notion of citizen architect, like, that you're both an architect and you're a it was really important in Sambo. He would say this, right, privately. It was really important that citizen came first. Right, you can be an architect later, but you got to be a citizen in the place that you live. It's different, and a citizen is different than a community member, right? I mean, we talk about like being a good community member, but if you think about who our community is, right? Community, especially these days, doesn't have anything to do with physical adjacency. Right, community, like my community is all over the world, right? I communicate with them by email and Twitter and all that other, your community are people who are like you, right? Your neighbors are maybe not like you. And there's a way that you live with your neighbors that is different than how you live with your community. And that comes to being a citizen, right? That you have a responsibility to living well together, whether we're alike or different, right? And that sort of friction becomes really important. So our students get that through accretion. They go off, to amazingly remarkable careers. They're very often a little frustrated when they leave Auburn, and then they find out that the world is a little different than what they sort of imagine. But we've got students like Dorothy who's been out for 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. Those are the kids that are in charge, right? Those are the folks that are in charge now. And you're actually beginning to see this sort of radical change in the profession right now. They begin to sort of understand this kind of responsibility to be citizens as a practitioner, as a professional practicing office. Like, what is your, what are your values as a company have changed? And that's honestly, our senior professionals will tell us it's pushed up by the young people today. They're extraordinarily value-driven in a way that embarrasses me when I think about when I was 18 and 19 and 20 years old and what motivated me and those sorts of things. They get a bum rap, and I know we get a very narrow slice of them, right? But the ones that come here to Auburn, the ones that come through our program are stunning. I mean, we're in pretty good shape. Looking over the horizon into the future, we're in pretty good shape with this bunch. Yes, sir.
What about other areas like outside of West Alabama, like Lower Alabama? Do you have a group that works with other parts of the state?
Yeah, that's a good question. Ours, because just the way we're spec'd out, we're local and we don't travel. We're place based, and so our service population at max is about 5 counties. But we do most of our work in Hale County, Marion County, Marengo County area. We move out a little bit, but we just don't have enough capacity, because then all of a sudden we'd be going someplace and coming back and spending the night and things like that. The 20K project, though, is designed to not rely on us. That sort of giving it away and sending it out and developing all of the processes that would allow us to not rely on us to go with it, to make sure that it happens right. That's what we're really designing. As designed, that house has a footprint of about a 13-state area. The processes are extensible all over the United States. We'd have to design the house a little bit differently to operate. But our goal is we fully expect, and this is some of the partnerships that we're working with, is to have fulfillment partners all over the United States that are providing these houses at an affordable price for folks. So that way we expect to get out there into the world. But we don't expect to ever have an outpost of Rural Studio someplace else. We're pretty fiercely place-based where we are. There's so much to do there with the limited resources that we have. It's tough. But we've got students all over, and they're doing stuff. Graduates that are out there working in the world. Our young people have been out there long enough that they're doing pretty remarkable things in the place they find themselves. Thank you all very much. Really look forward to having you out tomorrow. Hopefully the weather holds.